So Jesse, first of all, I'm kind of interested about how you got interested in this. What intrigued you about this particular story?
Well, I'm a huge Dodger fan, so this is just a part of my life. I've been to 16 consecutive opening days, and this year was no exception. So, I'm a Yasiel Puig fan, first and foremost. But, I've watched him. I've watched him struggle. I've watched him thrill us, too. And you know that there's some maturity issues. You know that he's from this very different place, different culture, different world. And there were just some things that weren't adding up. And if you read some of the profiles that were written at the height of Puig mania, you could kind of read between the lines, like there was something mysterious lurking there. And I don't know, I'm just an obsessive person. And frankly, LA Magazine sent me on this reverse journey, the reverse journey that Yasiel Puig took to Los Angeles. I went from California to Arizona, where the Dodgers were having spring training, and then to Florida, where a lot of the paths of smugglers and defectors and agents intersect, and then finally to Cuba, where I spent a week kind of poking around. I wanted to see where Yasiel Puig was born and where he came from.
Who were these Cubans that helped him get out?
Well, the people that initiated it were in Miami. So there's a guy who kind of set it all in motion. He's the small-time criminal air conditioning repairman. He has this idea that he's going to pay $250,000 to hire some smugglers to get Puig out of Cuba. And in return, Puig is going to owe his financial backer 20% of his earnings, supposedly into perpetuity.
How does this small-time businessman slash crook in Miami even know who this guy is in Cuba and that he's good enough to pay this money to get him out of there?
Well, I think he knew for sure that the market for Cuban baseball players was huge. There's something like 20 Cubans playing in the major leagues right now, and if you combine all their contracts, that's worth over $300 million. So I think anyone who's paying attention knows that major league teams are salivating over Cuban talent right now. But he did know somebody who knew Yasiel. Our financier, for lack of a better word, was friends with a boxer named Junior Despaigne. And he also had his problems with the Cuban government. He had been suspended from the Cuban national boxing team because they suspected him as a flight risk. But he was friends with Yasiel. They were, from the same sports academies, the same town, kind of, inhabited the same athletic circles. And so our financier calls Junior, the boxer, hey, can you get a message to Yasiel Puig? And that's what Junior does.
So there's a couple false attempts to get off the island where it doesn't quite work, but once they finally make it to Mexico, what happens when they get to Mexico?
Once they get to Mexico, that's where the craziness begins, because Yasiel Puig is in the hands of smugglers, professional traffickers. Their business is drugs and stolen boats and human cargo, and they now have probably the most valuable piece of human cargo that they've ever transported across the Caribbean. They have brought him to Isla Mujeres. He's in a dumpy motel off the coast of Cancun, and they want their money. They've done their job, and they are calling the financier in Miami for their $250,000, and that money is not forthcoming. And so you have this kind of breakdown in negotiations and then battle over who's going to pay for Yasiel Puig, and they hold him captive there for 20 some odd days as the price for his head is being negotiated. Fearing that they weren't going to get paid for Yasiel, the smugglers then started calling around to other baseball agents. And so I interviewed several agents who received calls from the Caribbean. Hey, we're in Mexico, we're in the Yucatan, and we have Yasiel Puig. Would you like to represent him? By the way, that will cost you $175,000 or $250,000. The price finally got up to $500,000.
Wow. So after all of that, how did Yasiel Puig get out of that hotel room?
Well, there's this kind of cinematic moment where his backers in Miami, his financiers, send a team of fixers, of henchmen to descend on Isla Mujeres, and they find the motel, and it sounds like almost like a bad screenplay, but they manage to spring him from this motel, get him out of Isla Mujeres to Cancun, and then from Cancun to Mexico City, and literally within a couple days, he is auditioning for Major League Scouts.
And then within a couple of weeks, he's living here in the U.S.?
Within a couple days, he has signed a contract for $42 million, which kind of changes the whole equation of his life. And then, yes, it's easy to come into the U.S. as a Cuban defector. You are immediately welcomed as, as a political refugee.
Mm-hmm. What role did a Mexican drug cartel play in this story?
Yeah, there is a Mexican cartel, a very notorious one called Los Zetas, and they sort of are lurking in the background of all of this. I don't believe they had any direct contact with Yasiel, but the smugglers who took him out of Cuba, the smugglers who held him in Mexico, they were in the pocket of Los Zetas. They had to pay the Zetas what they call a rite of passage, essentially a tax to do business in the Caribbean, to move their cargo, whatever that might be, back and forth.
He's obviously making a lot of money now, but in any other circumstance, we would describe this as human trafficking. What's the difference?
Oh, I don't think there is any difference. This is human trafficking as best as I can tell. I mean, somebody was paid to extract him from Cuba, move him across the Caribbean, and ultimately deliver him to the U.S. I think on this end, Major League Baseball, the Dodgers, the U.S. government doesn't really want to know about what he went through and what he suffered to get here. Once he's here, hey, it's great. You know, you're one of us, you're a Dodger, we love you, the fans love him, but it's almost as if we've turned a blind eye to the circumstances that allowed him to arrive.
His people largely were supportive of his play on the field, but it was some of his behavior off the field that wasn't so savory.
I think it depends what part of the country you're in. Dodger fans were a lot more forgiving of his antics on the field. I think you could ask some people in other parts of the country who thought there was a lot of showboating and a lot of kind of showing up the other team and disrespecting maybe some of those unwritten codes of the game.